you need to keep saying, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's right. And click the bell button to, all those things. Shelley's here. G'day, Shelley. Superstars of Power Platform are all here. Nice one. Well, I think we can probably just about get started. So, firstly, welcome. Thank you for coming. This is the Wednesday Lunch and Learn. This is a bit of a new format for the Power BI Melbourne meetup, but I just put it out on all platforms as well. I think this is a good format for everybody to come together and just have a chat about Power BI. Particular topics in Power BI. There's a whole bunch of content that we could go through. Now it's a little bit unstructured, as in that I don't have, I haven't pre-prepared any slides or anything like that. The idea here is that I want to make it a bit of an open conversation with the community. Not to say that I don't have a whole bunch of content we can go through, because I do. The first series, so we're doing a series of 10 weeks doing Lunch and Learns, and the first one that we'll be going through is around Power BI adoption. So this is the first of the adoption roadmap for Power BI, and specifically today we'll be talking about data culture. But before we start, I just wanted to first introduce myself. So for those of you that don't know me, or you haven't been in one of my sessions before, my name's Greg Nash. Here's my LinkedIn page. Might as well just use that. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the data platform. I help people with Power BI. Basically, I've been doing Power BI since it came out, which is about 7 years ago now. I'm the principal consultant at Dear Watson Consulting. And we do Power BI all day, every day. That's our job. So if you're interested in Power BI related stuff, then I'm probably a good person to connect to. And I'm easy to find because I'm Power BI Unicorn, the very controversial title. And we can talk about whether I can continue to keep that later. But today's session, I did want to make it an open conversation as much as possible. So feel free to jump in. I do accept heckling. I will mute everybody every now and then if I want to make a point, or if there's background noise or something like that. So I am looking at the chat and I'm looking at the hands. So if you do need to do that, feel free. Now I am recording the session, but I'm only recording me. But I am recording your voice. So if you do pipe up and say something, just be aware that the session is recorded. And so that will go up to YouTube. So there's been lots of people asking for the recording because I couldn't make it today. Other than that, welcome. This is Power BI. Like I said, it's a Power BI Melbourne user group meetup session, and essentially we're going to be talking about Power BI adoption. So what I wanted to do is just really point you guys in direction of some documentation first around adoption. And this is where I'm getting pretty much all of the content that we'll be talking today. I'm going to sprinkle this content in with my own personal experiences, and then also I wouldn't mind getting, I might see if other people are willing to share their experiences with Power BI adoption. I think it's a really interesting sort of area. So really, it's about, when we talk about Power BI adoption, what do we mean? It's about the roadmap for how do we get Power BI into an organization, right? And so it's about, well, I've got this tool, like any kind of Microsoft Office 365 tool, and really any technology, right? It's not a question of just turning on the tool and away it goes. Yeah, so there's this perception that, particularly in sort of like, I think a struggle that people have in IT, where there's so many generalists in the IT space, right? If you're in an IT team, you've got this problem where you really only have the capacity to turn on tools and turn them off again. And in Office 365, it's really easy, right? Your Office 365 administrator kind of turns on Power BI, and then they say, okay, go for it. But to actually have that embed inside your organization and have people use it, and to be able to advance that technology in your organization, it's not entirely straightforward, right? And so this is the point of this documentation. There's a series of articles there's 10 articles there. I was going to cover one article for each one of these Lunch and Learn sessions, and really just wanted to deep dive into it. So this is just about as much learning for me as it is for you guys as well, right? Because this is where I get a chance to deep dive into some of these specific topics. It also is going to help me put together presentations for the future around some of these topics. So when we talk about adoption, what do we mean? We really mean it kind of covers across this type of this image really covers the whole lot, right? So there's a few different areas. Like I said, there's kind of 10 different articles that Microsoft have provided there, and each one of those articles covers one of these areas, right? So today we're talking about data culture, or data culture, depending on how you say it on the day. And I do use data and data interchangeably, and I apologize in advance for that. I also say Azure, not Azure, because I say it all the time, and it's quicker. That's the only reason. I say it like the Americans say it. So there's data culture, there's the executive sponsor, there's content ownership and management, there's content delivery, there's center of excellence, there's governance, there's mentoring and user enablement, there's system oversight and administration, there's your community of practice, and then there's support, right? So there's so much to the adoption of a technology, and this is it's fairly universal. In fact, if you look up the Dynamics 365 adoption roadmaps, and if you look up the Power Platform adoption roadmaps, they've got similar kinds of articles associated with that. When we talk about adoption, advancing adoption and cultivating data culture is more about implementing technology features. Technology can assist an organization in making the greatest impact, but a healthy data culture involves a lot of considerations across the spectrum of people, process, and technology, right? And so the reason why we're talking about data culture first is because that's kind of what you're trying to achieve when you're putting in a tool like Power BI, right? It's like, what is data culture, and what does it do? Now, I'm remiss to start a talk about Power BI or to do something with Power BI without actually doing any Power BI in the talk. So I've created a form, and we're going to do a survey quickly just to get everybody's feedback on data culture, right? So it's a really simple form. Here's the form. It looks like this. It's got 2 questions: how many employees in your organization, and then a couple of rate your organization. How do you rate your tools, the access, the executive sponsorship, data culture, how people owning data sets. If you've got any questions about the questions, then feel free to do that. But I'll get the link for that. I'm going to paste it in the chat. We'll get you to do it right now because I've got a Power BI that connects to this, of course. So jump on that link, fill out the form, and then in real time we'll see what happens on the Power BI side. So if I go to Power BI, for consultants, do we want to talk about our client or our org? Probably clients are better from that perspective. If you're a consultant, and you can pick a client and maybe do one of those, or you could talk about your own organization. It's kind of interesting to think about that in that context, right? Is like, how well do we do at being consultants? That's something that I think about a lot.
Sorry, Greg, we can't. Yeah, we don't have the permissions.
Oh, really? It's not shared. Sorry. Let me do it quickly. My bad. Here I was thinking I was all prepared. Oh, I clicked on the wrong form and everything. Okay. Anyone can respond. Oh, that's a mentoring inquiry, of course. Back forms. Lunch and learn. Go. I even put a picture of lunch on the thing. Send. Only people. Anyone can respond. I don't need to save, do I? It just works. I'll just copy this link again, just in case it's a new link. Boom. Okay, now try. Sorry about that.
Yep, that's working now.
Excellent. Form's empty. That's what we wanted to see. Now we should get... Just someone let me know as soon as they've entered a form, and then I can hit the refresh button and it'll all start working. And if you're wondering how I do the forms thing, then we can talk about that later. I'll give you a video on how to do it. There's plenty of videos. Oh, there's 5 responses there. Should be working. Aha. Oh, we've got a good mix of people. So, some small organizations and some big ones, which is cool. We've had 11 responses. I'll keep refreshing. 27 responses. Ooh, how many people have we got in the room? Must be a few. 55, nice. Welcome everybody to those who have just joined. 28 responses. So who has the lowest scores? This is 501 to 2000. We've had 8 responses and the average was 3. So access to data, good. Data culture, middle of the road. Training and mentoring, a little lower. User support for reporting data, a little lower. People owning their own data sets, which I think is a really key thing. So that's interesting. Again, access to data, data culture, pretty low, right? And so you can see the average response for data culture is kind of just okay. So no one, and I think you're probably mostly in the Australian time zone, so Australians tend to never respond amazing to anything, but maybe it's skewed for the Australian audience. But you can see that this concept, I'm not surprised to see the concept of people owning data sets is a little lower, and data culture being a little lower. So the concept of data culture and the concept of data ownership are 2 things that you'll find is really common in organizations that we deal with. I would say that almost never, if I say to a customer when we first join them, okay, do you have someone who owns your data sets? You know, do you have a data product owner, say, for your client data? It's very rare that a customer will say, yeah, that's Joe Bloggs owns the client data. They're responsible for all the decisions around what goes into that data. They're responsible for the data quality. Because people tend to think of it more in silos, where you've got data ownership happens in like data entry happens across sort of the value stream in different areas, right? Sales enter all the sales data, and then CRM, you might have marketing enter CRM data, and then finance enter client data associated with finance. But nobody owns client data across the whole value stream. And so I'm not surprised to see that data ownership is low. I'll give it one more refresh and see if anything else comes out there. Oh, we got some good ones now. So what about very, very large organizations? So we've got 7 people from large organizations, 10,000 plus and 10,000. We'll go down to maybe 500 plus. So it looks like, again, data culture and people ownership, training and mentoring and support for reporting is an issue. But reporting tools are pretty good. Access to data is pretty good. Executive sponsorship's pretty good. So that's interesting to see in large organizations that you do have that kind of support potentially in a lot of organizations, whereas these are the kind of the areas that'll tend to be lacking. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it today. I want you to know how you got form data directly into Power BI without going via a list first. Exactly, Lorian. I have a trick, my friend, and I'll send you a video. There's a API link you can call, and then you just put in the form ID, and bang, it works. Look, I'll show you right now. Why not? We might as well do some Power BI while we're doing Power BI Lunch and Learn.
I'm interested with the executive sponsorship because, in my experience, a lot of executives, they like the idea of kind of a data culture, but maybe they don't so much understand it. And they may talk in big words, but the kind of, when it comes down to the implementation, sometimes it's lacking.
Yeah, exactly right. And the need is always there. And one of the interesting things about the executive sponsorship thing, and we'll talk about the executive sponsorship of data projects, is, like you say, like almost every strategic thing that CEOs come up with is always about we have to learn more about our customers and we have to do more with data, and there's all this kind of like high level rhetoric around how that works. But the actual, so that's where I think that executive sponsorship comes from. They want it, but the actual delivery of that, and there's that saying about big data where they say big data is like teenage sex, right? Everybody's talking about it, but nobody really knows what they're doing, right? And so that's where I see that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff landing. All right, well, that's the survey. Kind of interesting. I'll probably do surveys every week because it's kind of fun, and I do like that forms trick without having to use any Power Automate or anything. Straight into Power BI. Good times. Okay, so data culture. So when we say data culture, what do we mean? What is data culture? So here's Microsoft's kind of definition of data culture, if you like. We'll get rid of this little stray guy down the bottom. So think of data culture as what you do, not what you say, to Michael's point earlier about the rhetoric around it, right? So data culture is not a set of rules, that's governance. Data culture is a somewhat abstract concept. It's the behaviors and norms that are allowed, rewarded, and encouraged, or those that are disallowed and discouraged. Bear in mind that a healthy data culture motivates employees at all levels of the organization to generate and distribute actionable knowledge. And I think that is that's a reasonable definition of how I think of data culture. Is there anyone else that has a feedback around what data culture means, or do they have an alternative thought about that? No, I think it's a pretty good definition. So really, it's the culture of the organization, and so the tool like Power BI, right? That's the purpose of that tool, is to build a data culture within that organization. No one's going to use Power BI if you don't have a good data culture in your organization, and so you're going to face with that thing. Now, within an organization, I've got these stray guys down the bottom here. I must have done that during practice. All right, I'll get rid of that guy too. Okay, so within an organization, certain business units and teams, like they're going to have their own culture. They're going to have their own behaviors, their own norms, their own processes for getting things done. It means that in specific ways, data culture objectives can vary across those organizational boundaries, right? So you've got this concept of different teams do different things. And so to be able to bring in data culture, we need to align that organizational data culture objectives, right? So it's this idea of aligned autonomy. So everybody works autonomously, but they work towards a single goal. So what is made up of data culture? What does that kind of look like? So, and you can see that it's not really a single thing. It's not really a single kind of entity, data culture, right? There's an aspect of everything about it. So you've got this concept of executive support and the center of excellence. So the center of excellence is running all the rules around how we be excellent at building reporting and how we be excellent at delivering the technology or delivering reports or data in our organization. You've got mentoring, you've got user support, you've got a community of practice, a community of, similar to what all we are now, right? We're a community of people who have a similar interest in Power BI or in sort of technology or in the Power Platform suite, and we're talking about a specific topic here, and so this is again that kind of idea of building a community of practice within your organization. So everybody, they might be in different teams, but they all use Power BI, and so building that community of practice, that's going to be a big part of your data culture. Governance, so the rules and regulations about how you do and what you can do. The system oversight, monitoring, who's using what reports, all those types of things. You've got things like data literacy within the organization. Democratization, which is how available do you make your internal data to your organizational data to your users, right? So this concept of inside your organization, if you're a very risk-averse organization and you've got a really kind of sort of strongly opinionated IT team, they might lock down everything, right? And they say, no, we can't let users access any data because it's too dangerous. They're going to go off and they're going to post everything to Twitter, and all of our internal data is suddenly going to be out there in the world. And so how open is that data is kind of the concept of data democratization. And then discovery, how easy is it to find those data sets? You've got content ownership. So we spoke a little bit about that earlier, right? That's people who own who owns what piece of content, who owns what piece of data, and then the delivery scope as well. And so we can talk a little bit about that. And so all of that makes up that whole kind of holistic idea is what data culture is, right? It's kind of going to be something to do with a little bit of everything. So it makes it a little bit esoteric, it's a little bit hard to measure. Like I said, building data culture is closely related to adopting Power BI. It's a key aspect of an organization's digital transformation. The term data culture can be defined different ways by different organizations. So in our series of talks and in these articles, data culture really means that set of behaviors of norms.
One of the
I just got to do a mute. Sorry, everybody.
no, that's okay.
Okay.
I have to.
Okay, so data culture is going to encourage our organizational stakeholders. Oops, that's the wrong thing. Sorry. Try and get my copy and paste working. It's going to encourage your employees to make data-based decisions, right? So what you're really trying to do when you're putting data culture in is you're trying to get more stakeholders throughout the organization using data. You want to be making decisions based on analytics, not on opinions. So people are like, I'm going to do stuff with my gut. It should be based on trusted data. And I think that concept of trusted data is the key one there, right? Is there's always going to be that consideration for people in your organization and for executives if they don't trust the data that comes through, if the pipelines that you're setting up for your customers, or for your, if you're a consultant, that's going to be your customers, if it's your internal users, if that's not a solid pipeline, then they're not going to trust the data, right? And you just end up with, and I can sure there's 20 people in the room that can put their hand up to say what happens to an organization when they don't trust the source data or the source system data. You just end up in a quagmire of hell where people are constantly questioning the data that's coming through. No reporting really is effective. It can't really be done. Reducing reliance on undocumented tribal knowledge. So I think that's an interesting idea, right? This concept of tribal knowledge where people inside your team or inside teams, they know how to do it their way. And so it's undocumented. It's kind of a casual kind of knowledge that is taught. Well, Shelley does it this way, and so therefore I'm going to do it this way as well. And she taught me, and then she left, and then I taught Boris, and then Boris taught somebody else. And so you end up with these cliques of knowledge inside your organization. And your data culture, you want to reduce the reliance on hunches and gut decisions, which we already really spoke about. Okay, so one of the ways that you can implement a data culture, and one of the things that Microsoft kind of recommends, is this concept of what we call a data culture vision. So data culture is imprecise, it's difficult to define and measure, right? So we kind of know that now. So it's challenging to articulate it in a way that's meaningful to your end users or to your customers, right? And we want to make it actionable and measurable. So to be able to do that, you need a well understood definition of what a healthy data culture means to your organization. So let's highlight that, because I think that's an important point. Oh, my highlighter doesn't work for some reason. I'm in don't work highlighter mode. Click here, click there. No, I don't know how to use OneNote. I'm so good at OneNote. A well understood definition of what a healthy data culture means to your organization is going to be like a key thing. So the vision of the healthy data culture should, and we'll get to this bit. Where's my data culture vision? Okay. So the first thing that it should do is originate from the executive level, yeah? So align with organizational objectives. So originate from the executive level. Once again, executive sponsorship is going to be so important if you're trying to really make any kind of technology change. So the first person, if you're in an organization that doesn't have great executive sponsorship right now of your data, then you really need to, that's probably, you could basically drop everything else and start just focusing on getting good executive sponsorship for your projects. Because until you do that, this concept of data culture, these things that they talk about in their rhetoric where the CEO is going on, it's just not going to happen, right? So, and it's very, very easy to kind of get them on board because it does align normally with their strategies, right? They're normally talking in this kind of language, and they'll probably be appreciative of you coming to them and saying, hey, listen, we're trying to, improve data culture. This is going to align with all these things that you've said around, improving the way we do things and tying it back to the rhetoric that they're using already, and then getting them to build that vision and then helping them get that across the organization, right? So it's taking some of the rhetoric they're already talking about and then aligning that to be able to create that data culture. So we're aligning it with their organizational objectives. This is why it needs to come from the top. The data culture vision is going to influence your adoption strategy, right? So your vision of this sort of mission that the senior level people are putting on everybody else is going to influence the way that Power BI and other tech is adopted. So you have to have that has to be clear and fairly simple, right? Because when you're dealing with creating a vision from the top and you're in a sort of a very large organization with a lot of hierarchy, then the CEO needs to be able to communicate that in a way that everybody understands it and remembers it. It's sort of that concept of knowledgeable of like KPIs and things, right? They need to be simple, they need to be well understood, and they need to be meaningful to everybody so that people can remember them when they need to. So your data culture vision is going to serve as like a higher level guiding principles for enacting governance policies and guidelines and that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why maybe people want to you're like where you might be able to talk to these executive people about that, right? So the motivation for establishing data culture often comes from a specific strategic business problem, right? It might be, sales are tanking and we just had COVID run through the place and now we need to react. Like we see that a lot. I don't know about the other consultants in the room, but certainly for us, we see that a lot. A lot of the work we're doing now is reactive, right? It's reactive to COVID. It's reactive to new things emerging all the time. And so we see that that reactive thing is going to be a big driver for that kind of change. It could be a proactive change, like we just bought a new business and we're trying to integrate those two things. Another very common scenario in the world of Power BI, we just bought 3 businesses and we've now got 3 ERPs and now we want to bring all those things together. Or it could be driven by like external changes, which is things like inefficiencies, economic downturn, the kind of stuff we've already spoken about, right? So you have to try and hone in on what is the reason that your kind of executive level people are looking to improve these things. And so look for that initial motivation. In those specific situations, there's usually a specific area where data culture will take root. The specific area could be a scope that's smaller than the entire organization, right? So you're going to find these areas that are much more data intensive. They're much more interested in what's happening in the world of data. And so you might look to be able to pick those up, because one of the key things about Power BI adoption, and one of the things we talk about to our customers a lot, is that initial pilot project, right? And we talk about that in the Power BI adoption framework, right? Which is that public framework. And this set of articles is meant to almost replace that at some point, but they haven't quite covered all of it. And one of the things they talk about is this concept of a pilot project. So that's the initial project. It needs to be high value, low complexity, get Power BI in, help people get behind Power BI and really understand it. So you're looking for that inside the organization. Where are people where are those smaller teams that are reacting or making proactive changes? Then you're looking to incrementally replicate and adapt that for the rest of the organization. So the technology can help with the goals of data culture. Implementing specific tools or features isn't really the objective, though, right? It's the people, like it's the interaction between people and data. So we're going to talk about now a little bit more about what helps with making a healthy data culture. So one of the sort of key success metrics, I guess, for data culture is how discoverable is your data. So successful data culture depends on users working with the right data in their day-to-day activities. Achieving this goal, users need to find and access data sources, reports, and other artifacts. You need to be able to find the data you need. Data discovery is the ability to sort of search and locate relevant data sources and artifacts. Primarily, data discovery is concerned with improving awareness that data exists. Yeah, when data is siloed in different departmental systems, they don't know it's there, and so they might not know it's available. And so this is really about creating a more discoverable data platform that people can do. So obviously, Power BI has a ton of features that help you a lot with data discovery. The things that come to mind for me are really just the whole platform itself is a whole data discovery area. But when you're in sort of Power BI and you're playing around with this stuff, like I've got this Power BI datasets button, right? So this is all of the datasets available to me as a Power BI user in my environment. And I've got promoted datasets, this concept of endorsement. This is making datasets very discoverable for me. So I want to create a new report on my Simpsons dataset for whatever reason. I can just go in there, I can find that Simpsons dataset. This is all the datasets available to me. And now I can create new content on top of that. And I can start to pull different data in. All right. Select the database or specific tables you like. You can even pull a specific table, which I think is new because I didn't know you could do that. And that's very cool. Okay. It gave me a security risk. I want to see what happens here. It just did direct query to one table. Are you serious? Oh my God. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. You can actually, you can join it into your model. You can add all the tables you want as well, and then you can just trim them out. Like you can remove individual tables. So if you're only want to bring your measures and like a dim date to join in,
and it's sitting in a data model.
The fact table actually in.
What? I thought that you could only do that with data flows. I cannot believe I just learned something doing my own presentation. Awesome. When did that come out, Michael? That must have been semi-recent.
Yeah, it's pretty recent.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm glad it's recent. Wow. That's amazing. Okay, and it's direct query. So it's going to direct query the live data source, right? But that's really data discovery right here, right? These are all my data sets. I can find those data sets easy. I can search the Simpsons or whatever, and it's going to give me all of the data sets, where they live, and then which one and what their endorsement levels are. So these endorsement levels are like certified, promoted. So you can put different data. So you can have data sets like if Joe Blow uploads his own crap up into your Power BI environment, you can set you might have certified data sets where it's gone through the BI team and you've properly certified what's going on. So you're going to have different levels of endorsement depending on what you're doing that. So the platform supports all of this kind of data discovery stuff, which is really cool. And you can, sorry, what was that?
Sorry, I think Power BI is doing it really well, but I find that most organizations don't invest in data cataloging enough. MDM and data catalogs and stuff are just not a sexy project. They don't actually make money, they just cost money. And so it can be really, really hard to get the clients to agree to do these sorts of projects, even though we all know as data professionals that it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any tips for quantifying the value of a data catalog project?
Quantifying the value of a data cataloging project is a really interesting one. So I'm going to throw that to the floor after I have a bit of a think about it maybe. But my initial thoughts on quantifying data discovery is that, man, it comes all the way back to this concept of data culture and achieving those organizational objectives, right? Because the more discoverable, so it's about velocity of decision making. We're as Power BI people, we're kind of in the business of insight delivery, right? So the faster we deliver insights to people, and the if we create a platform where people can make decisions more quickly, then it's a force multiplier for your organization. It's not just like it's going to save you, $100,000 if you do it this way. It makes your organization like significantly more agile, significantly higher velocity, and therefore significantly better than all of your competition. So that's probably why it's so hard to quantify, is because adding this kind of culture into your organization is going to like increase the time to be able to think up, or to be able to come up with decisions, because you've got access to data there, and people can do ad hoc requests. So when the CEO comes up with the top of his head an idea that he thinks is going to, improve the organization's velocity or improve the organization's bottom line, you can immediately kind of start feeding data back in that's going to help support that decision, rather than having to, that he's gone a little bit left field and and the data doesn't exist in the data warehouse yet. So then we need to set up a project to see if this thing will even work. And then we've got to get data into our data warehouse, and that takes 6 months. And then by that time, the opportunity is lost. So this is about velocity of decision making. Does anyone else have any other thoughts about that? Discovery and going through the exact process.
I don't have any points specifically. I was going to ask what tools people use.
Yeah, maybe pop in the chat what type of tools you've got at the moment. Are you using Power BI? What do you use for discovery specifically? Do you use a governance platform like Purview, right? Or there's probably any number of master data manager, the old SQL master data manager type technologies. What types of technologies are you guys using in your organizations right now? While people are putting that in the chat, the ones that I've seen recently, I think there's a move towards Dataverse. I think Dataverse is a really interesting platform for people to look at from a master data management point of view. And the reason why, and we've been recommending it to customers, is because it's got a little bit of that Excel integration that Master Data Manager used to have in the old days, where you could maintain tables in a SQL-like environment and then publish them up, but it would retain it in a way that's kind of master data. So Dataverse is an interesting one. SharePoint lists and things like that for the more casual stuff is another way to kind of, maintain the master data. But then, what do you use for your analytics tools? Are you still, is it just Excel? Are you using Power BI a lot? We've got a data catalog, which is becoming Purview. So Michael's talking about Purview. We're looking to get Purview, a new client at the moment. They already have 2 other MDM tools. What are the other tools, Michael?
I forget. I'm not fully on the project yet.
Yeah. I'm interested in the tools for a data catalog. Calibra is another data cataloging tool. Yeah, so data cataloging tools are...
So Mike, what's the issue that you're having difficulty with buy-in?
So what does the data catalog solve? Is that...
Yeah. I know what it solves, but is that the difficulty with the actual getting it across the line with the client? Like the need?
Yeah, so in terms of how hard it is, it's because it's a cost. So, if you're going into an organisation, they only have a fixed budget for IT, they would much rather get the new snazzy sales report than go back and catalogue all their data. And so it's about trying to convince management that they should invest in this, and then describing to them how, what that means for them. So I was just wondering if anyone had any tips. That was kind of the problem.
Mm.
Yeah, this is more a conversation where you are trying to lead towards, when you are challenged by, if you're looking at profitability challenges, you don't just look at what can save you money. You're also looking at what can make you money. So it's kind of a little bit of that goes on in the conversation that you're having with the stakeholders, like the client, is as opposed to looking at what can you deliver, in like a physical form, as in I can deliver this really nice looking report, you also have to have, like a tree doesn't grow without roots. You can literally stick a stick in the ground and have branches and say, here's that tree. But then at the sign of the first wind, it will blow out or blow over. So you really have to kind of guide the dialogue that you're having with those key stakeholders as to how important it is, like in terms of their needs, like their thinking, how needful it is that the item that you wish to deliver, the product that you wish to deliver, which is the report, actually can stand alone and empower the people within the organization. So it cannot do that without the roots. And the roots are, in this particular example that you're talking about, the roots would be a catalog of the data, because when you let go, so when you have produced the report or you make that report for them, they need to still be able to go in and continue to feed the product that you've delivered for them. So this is about output as much as it is about inputs. And it is it's something that I have to deal with multiple times on a daily basis. And I'm not particularly great at it, but maybe bringing it into this conversation that we're having here for this lunchtime session is that rather than having this coming into a conversation with the stakeholders thinking, okay, what requirements do we need from them and what inputs do they need? What we're looking at more is and this is why we're talking about adoption, is what outputs are we looking to achieve? So in longer term, like what we're doing is we need to make it hold. So your argument needs to be that it's self-sufficient. I mean, that's really ultimately what they want. They don't actually just want a report. They want something that provides them empowerment and self-sufficiency.
Yeah, that idea of making it real for like Ellen and we experience this a lot, right? We talk to like the senior stakeholder in a thing, and they go on and on about how we need to be all this and that and agile and all the rest of it, but then as soon as you say, okay, well, what we're going to do is try and make that real for you. We want to go and talk to all of the end users and really understand that piece and deliver something that is actually meaningful to that. They're like, no, just go and build this Excel spreadsheet I gave you, right? And so there's that kind of almost like a disconnect between at those upper levels where they talk a good game, but then when it actually comes to taking that approach, which is like a human-centered approach, right? It's like you go talk to the people first and understand what they're trying to do. And then, and I think, coming back a little bit to data discovery, there's a lot of that in there, right? Is that you're trying to make it real by making the data sets that are meaningful to people discoverable, and ones that aren't meaningful to people get pushed away. And so data discovery is going to, be a huge piece in that, and different tools. And I noticed in the comments there's like, how do we learn all these different tools? And there's so many, and what do we do? And yeah, it's that's part of the challenge. From a Power BI point of view, Azure Purview is the governance tool that you should be looking at. So that's definitely one to put on your list. And then in Power BI itself, those kind of data discovery stuff that we already spoken about with endorsements and the dataset hub and that kind of stuff. So the second thing is data democratization. And so we spoke a little bit about data democratization before. So data democratization refers to putting data in the hands of more users who are responsible for solving business problems, about enabling them to make decisions with their data. So that's not just like a lack of security, right? We're not just talking about like removing security from data sets, which I think a lot of people, that's the fear that IT people have when we talk about data democratization. Nor does it imply like a lack of justification based on job role. As a part of a healthy data culture, data democratization helps reduce shadow IT by providing data artifacts that are properly secured, governed, well managed, and meet the business needs in cost-effective and a timely way. So the difference between the Wild West and data democratization is working hand in glove with IT to surface up those data sets that are important to people and that are useful to their jobs. And so just as much as it is important to make them discoverable, it's also important to make them secure. Yeah, and you need to be able. That means you need IT on board, right? You can't go off as a shadow organization and try and get around that, because IT will very quickly knock your project on the head, because someone from security will come along and say these guys are enabling PII or some other private data, or IP data that your company has, and it's going to cause you all sorts of problems. Your organization's position on data democratization will have a wide-reaching impact on adoption and governance-related efforts. Here is some interesting examples of what you need to think about when it comes to democratization. So who's permitted to have Power BI desktop installed? Yeah, and who's permitted to have the licenses? So that's the second thing. What type of self-service are we putting into our organization? How does it vary based on business units or job roles, right? So some areas in the organization, they're going to want to have a very analytical approach. They're going to want to get into the data. They want raw data level to build their own Power BI stuff. Others, they want a beautiful golden data set model. Then all they do is just build, like pretty pie charts on top of that model. And others, again, are only just going to consume it. They're never actually going to build any content themselves. So how much are you enabling that within your organization? What's the balance between the concept of enterprise BI versus self-service BI? If you're not sure what enterprise BI and self-service BI is, enterprise BI is basically, think of it as IT controlled or BI team controlled, right? Highly controlled, only content comes through enterprise. It all goes through the governance platform. Nobody builds their own content. It all has to go through there if you want to access it. Self-service BI, the complete opposite of that. Everybody builds their own content. There is no governance. Everybody just builds whatever and publishes it up to Power BI. So what's the balance there? Do you want highly enterprise? Do you want highly self-service? Do you want a combination of both? And most people, they want some kind of blend, right? The managed self-service BI, we call that. Are the data sources that are strongly preferred? What are your data sources that you need to use? If I'm getting client data, do I get that from CRM? Do I get it from the ERP? Do I get it from the finance application? What's the single source of truth on particular data sets, and which sources are going to be preferred? And then what do we do with unsanctioned data sources? How do we deal with them? Who manages that content? Is a decision different for data versus reports, right? So who manages data, the data sets versus the reports? And is the decision different for enterprise BI users versus decentralized and users who own and manage their own self-service content? And then also, who can consume the content, particularly when you're thinking about customers, external people, suppliers? How do we do that? So enabling data democratization isn't just necessarily about governance. It's about asking these questions around that. If access to data or the ability to perform analytics is limited to a select number of individuals in the organization, it's a warning sign, since the ability to work with data is a key characteristic of data culture. You cannot have good data culture if you don't give people data. I think that's pretty obvious. Okay, data literacy. So data literacy is the ability to interpret data, right? Interpret, create, and communicate data effectively and accurately. So how's everybody's data literacy in their organizations or in their customers, right? Where's data literacy at? We should have put that on the survey. We'll do that for next week. Less Excel reports, please. If you constrain the data, they'll just export it and do their own. Exactly right, Michael. Mitigation of rework. It's also an upfront cost. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and a little bit more on Ellen stuff. But, data literacy is always going to be, and that's usually around training efforts, yeah? Mentoring, user enablement, focus on how to use the technology itself. Technology skills are important to produce high quality solutions. However, it's also important to consider how to purposely advance data literacy throughout the organization. I'll copy that and put it on the thing here. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, there it is. How to purposely advance data literacy throughout your organization. So how, not only we can train people on the tool, right? Power BI is easy to train on the tool. There's so much content out there in the world on how to build Power BI reports. But data literacy is going to be a whole other thing. So how do you go about improving data literacy in your organization? Depends on a lot of factors. You've got the current skill set, the complexity of the data, the types of analytics that people require, and other things that people, need to focus on. How to interpret a chart and a graph, or how valid is data? Yeah. Root cause analysis. So, like root cause analysis, being able to dig into data and then, determine the root cause of something, and having techniques for doing root cause analysis using data. Is that built into your organization now? How are people doing root cause analyses now? Correlation and causation, like just even understanding the difference between that, where, correlation is not necessarily causation, and knowing the difference and being able to have those discussions in your organization is going to be a key thing. Context and outliers. So you can be talking about, like clusters of events, and then you've got outliers, and people understanding what the impact of that outlier is, and being able to present outliers in ways that are meaningful to people, and then using data storytelling to help consumers quickly understand and act. So if you've got really good data culture, then people inside your organization, they're going to have really good data storytelling techniques, right? They're going to have you'll walk into meetings, people will bring Power BI up, and they'll be telling that data story and clicking on different bookmarks or interactions in their reports, and being able to clearly articulate what they mean. And so data storytelling is going to be a key piece there. If you're struggling to get data culture or governance efforts approved, focus on the tangible benefits. So this is maybe to Michael's point earlier about the tangible benefits that you can achieve with data discovery, finding the data democratization, using the data, or data literacy, which is understanding the data. It also can be helpful to focus on specific problems that can be solved or mitigated through data culture advancements. Getting the right stakeholders to agree on the problem is usually the first step. So articulate the problem. Then it's a matter of getting the stakeholders to agree on a strategic approach to the solution, and from there on to the solution details. So that's an interesting little tip from Microsoft there. If you're struggling to get data culture or governance efforts approved, focus on those tangible benefits. And I know it can be hard to articulate the tangible benefits. Okay, finally, here's some considerations and key actions that you can do to improve the data culture in your organization. So we'll run through these. Firstly, give consideration to what type of data culture you want to cultivate, ideally from a position of user empowerment rather than a position of command and control. So even though the vision has to come from the senior people, this is about end user empowerment, right? So you can't necessarily go with the command and control thing. So my tips, I guess, on user empowerment versus command and control is about building organizational learning through team chat, like creating people at the lower level fully understanding not just the vision and the mission, but then also talking through understanding the full end-to-end process for building something, say, in Power BI, right? So everything from how data gets in. So we're talking at either the business level or at your lower analysts level. They should have a really clear understanding of like the source systems for data, how that data gets transformed as it comes in, how that data then gets stored, how it then gets pulled into your data models, what kind of things happen in the data models before they even get to the point where maybe they're creating new data models or they're creating new DAX, right? So, and then also how that gets used, how that report or whatever they're building gets used down the line. Okay, so you're empowering them to not only just understand my little piece of the world, which is collect some data sets and build some reports, but also how that data gets fed in and how that data is used. If you create that kind of value stream end to end, then you're going to empower those people to be able to make better decisions when they're building those reports. Talk to stakeholders. That's just, you might as well just be the number one tip, right? Talk to stakeholders in different business units to understand what analytics practices are currently working well and what doesn't work well for decision making. Conducting a series of workshops to understand the current state and formulate the desired future state. And Ellen will be happy to hear that because that's literally what her job is at our organization. So, so that concept of having workshops with your end users is so important. It surprises me how often reporting and data people don't talk to their end users and try to understand what they're actually using the report for. There's this concept of where they just get given a spreadsheet or they get given a report. The user says to them, hey, I want you to replicate this report, and nobody asks any questions. They just go off and try and replicate it. And then they produce the report, but it turns out there was something wrong with that report all along. And nobody asked the question of, how do you use this? Is there a better way to do this? Because Power BI, they don't know what they don't know, right? There's so many other features like interactivities, things that you can do, drill through, bookmarks, all sorts of interactions that it's not Excel. Power BI is not Excel, and it's not Crystal reports, right? It's a totally different platform from that perspective. So really understanding what people are trying to do with it is really important. Don't forget about IT. Talk to IT. And BI or the Center of Excellence to understand what governance constraints, right? So you need to understand your governance constraints when it comes to this stuff. They're going to educate everybody on security and infrastructure, right? Because IT, that's what they care about. They care about security, they care about infrastructure, they care about keeping the lights on. They don't care about how they use the reports. IT are like, turn it on, make sure it runs, make sure it's efficient, make sure it doesn't cost too much, all that kind of stuff. So have those conversations with them. Understand your level of executive sponsorship and support, right? And so you need to potentially verify that so that you can think about that from a data culture perspective. And then putting in purposeful decisions about your BI strategy. So what's the ideal balance? We spoke about that balance of self-service, managed self-service, or enterprise BI. How do those things, what's the balance for that? Consider how it relates to the extent of published content for personal BI, team BI, departmental BI, and enterprise BI. So, you've got people making different decisions at different levels. There's also project level BI as well, right? Different workspaces for different purposes. And so you need to think about how that published content kind of works. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about content delivery. And then put together like an action plan or something like that is going to, help you with the immediate, short-term and long-term action items for improving data culture, identifying the business groups that are going to potentially, give you a quick win, and then build on that, use that to go on from there. Did anyone have any other thoughts about actions you can take to improve data culture? Oh, Lorian's doing tech support for her sick kids. No other thoughts there. All right. So if you want to think, no worries. Thanks, Simon. If you want to get a feel for where you're at in terms of data culture, there's a link in here for the maturity levels. Yeah. And so Microsoft use this maturity scale across a lot of their stuff. And this is an interesting one, right? So if you're a level 100 maturity level for data culture, then you've got business intelligence, but it's kind of chaotic. Everybody there's no formal process around it. People kind of do whatever they want. You've probably got a very large backlog of requests for your enterprise BI team, which is going to be a common scenario for people. There's not really any oversight or visibility into self-service. You don't really know who does what. Successes or failures of BI solutions not really understood, right? So if you're at that level, then you're at the very early stages of BI, right? Of data culture. Level 200, multiple teams have had measurable success, right? So now you're at the stage where you've got people who are having some successes with self-service BI. They're doing some things, but you're starting to think about whether we go with a full enterprise BI control thing or whether we want to enable more self-service BI. Where does that balance fit, right? So you're getting into that kind of, you've set up a little bit of a self-service BI quick win, and you're looking to now start to repeat that. 300, you've got defined, so specific goals are established for advancing the data culture. People are talking about data culture and they're saying, okay, here's where we want to be. Here's the goals. And People are using self-service BI practices incrementally and purposefully replicated throughout more of the organization. So it's grown now to be, there's more people using it. So not just Greg is building his own self-service BI stuff. Other people in the organization are also starting to bring that in, right? So you're getting it across, right? So that's your maturity level 300. 400, now you've got clear goals, decision making's aligned with the organizational objectives, it's actively supported by the executive sponsor, they're talking about data culture in executive meetings and things like that, and that data culture discussions are impacting strategies. There's a healthy and productive partnership between the Center of Excellence, which is sort of the group of people who talk about Power BI as a tool for the organization, various business units and IT. And if you're building cool BI solutions, then you're getting recognized at some of the executive level. Hey, Peter's out there, he built this really cool thing. And now let's give him the CEO award for making cool stuff or whatever. And then level 500, it's not just about getting it in, it's now you're talking about efficiencies, right? You've got key performance indicators around what's happening in your data culture. You've got ways of measuring it within your organization. The business value of BI solutions is being regularly evaluated measures, feedback loops happening, and continual improvement of the organization's adoption, user adoption, solution adoption are top priorities, right? So you're really in the zone there where you're doing that. So you can think about that in terms of your own organization and where you live. Feel free to share it in the chat if you feel right. And executive support is there, but there's a fundamental misunderstanding of resource, time, and skill required to implement Power BI. How to explain and then secure the resources required. I just want to see a report by the end of the month. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about when I say there's that disconnect between the rhetoric from the executive and then what they actually ask for in the project, right? They're all about, yeah, we need this data, we need to be better and blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, just give me the report, just give me the report, just give me the report. And you've got this backlog of stuff that you have to do as a BI team or whatever. And you're constantly behind the eight ball and no one's having that conversation with them of how are you using it and how is it, and how is this, how can we build like an actual meaningful thing that they're actually going to use? And so, that conversation is definitely one that someone you need to start having. And yeah, I don't know, give me a call, I'll come in and tell them what's what. Which level has users wanting PowerPoint presentations of dashboards rather than going to the dashboard itself? Yeah, lots of that too. Lots of users saying, well, that's board members are the classic one. We always say when we're dealing with board security, board reporting, is that okay? So you want to output this to PDF, because board members, they're always like 80 years old and they don't even want an iPad. They want something they can print out and then they want to write on it, and then they want to give it back to whoever the CEO is or whatever. And so you're going to have these different user contexts, like contexts in which people consume data, right? And the problem with that in board reporting is like the culmination of every single data set gets all tied up into one KPI, which is, how many widgets did we sell this week or whatever. And then versus what it was supposed to be last week, and so the complexity down below is incredibly high, and then it all just culminates up into this one very simple kind of report or set of reports. And so that's always it's always an interesting one. And that, my friends, is about it for data culture. Did anyone have any other questions about data culture, or maybe want to share their experience? Andrew saying he shouldn't have used his work account to join this. A friend, he's talking for a friend here, feels that his management team will see BI team as report writers who write you out a report and don't understand governance and all those other aspects of data culture. I 100% see that a lot in other organizations as well.
On your point about board reports, one particular client we had recently, they printed out, they wanted specifically to print out the report and read it on the train. Yeah,
print out the report and read it on the train. That's exactly right. And one of the main ways that I see Power BI implementations fail is no one asked them that, right? No one actually went to ask the board how they actually consume this, and so it's never going to work for them. It's never going to be something that that they can, like, you can create the coolest interactive Power BI report you like, but if you didn't consider that it needed to be printed out so that they could read it on the train and put highlighters on it or whatever, it's never going to work for them. And so even though you might have a really great tool and a really great solution, just nobody spoke to the right stakeholder for that particular report or that particular piece. And that's a whole, and that leans into all of this stuff. Tell them to buy an iPad. Exactly, Belinda. Exactly. Give them an iPad. Yep. All right. Was there any other questions? I'm going to scroll up the chat a little bit, see if I missed anything. Upfront cost savings. Power BI itself is easy, but not many people understand they need to use calculations, DAX and Power Query to create beautiful reports. I think there's a learning curve, right, when it comes to Power BI, and it's deep. It's a deep, there's different aspects of it, and so that's really interesting thing when you're talking to new organizations or that are just bringing in Power BI, because some people are like, just give them all access to data and they can go, but then they have to learn DAX and Power Query and that kind of stuff. So what's the next level of abstraction there? Can we create just models for them that they can consume? And then they don't have to learn the DAX piece and they don't have to necessarily learn the Power Query piece. But then what do they lose when we take that away from them? Like they lose a certain amount of flexibility and self-service. And, like there's people on the call here I know that are business users that have learned Power BI themselves, like they're, and so they can learn to a certain point, but then they're like, this just gets hard, right? Power BI just gets hard after a while. And so they need to talk to somebody. And for all the consultants here, you are the guys that they talk to, right? They ring you up and they ask you those questions, and so it's about, well, how much do we, and then for you, it's like, how much knowledge do I hand over to this person, and is that going to be helpful to them, or are we just, all we're doing is just creating another area that, that's just too much, and they should concentrate more on being, what their main role is, whether it's, like the head of sales or whatever. Who should run? Yeah. Yes, Belinda.
It's Belinda here. Nice to see you again. I just thought I'd make a comment, and it might depress the group really, because I'm just looking at Peter's question, which says who should run data culture, data analytics team, or business stakeholder. And as someone who is a business unit and has business unit user and has worked with Greg on Power BI and just changed jobs, sadly, I think it does stem from the top. The difference between directors and people at the top really believing in the value of data versus people who just don't get it makes such a difference. I mean, I've been in my new company 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks, and I've already had a meeting with the managing director who told me how passionate he is about making sure we have good data. So that's really encouraging and makes all the difference. Whereas I spent a year having presentations with our directors, trying to show them the way forward and what it will enable and facilitate. And even though I'm a business user and can speak in their language, there's still a real blockage, because people at the C-suite level, you can't talk to them the way we're talking today. Like they've got to be spoken to in a different way, even all this terminology. So, we tried to create a data governance team at our last company, but there was resistance from above, because they're like, what do we need that for? That sounds like you're going to put blockages and barriers in the way of doing things. So I think it's also because data people tend to speak about data. We should actually stop using the word data and talk about information or customer information, because it changes the C-suite level, the way they think, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, that thanks for that, Belinda. That's an awesome insight into what it's like on the business side. Is there any other business people on the chat that wanted to add to that, or any other comments about what it's like being out there in the world? Amen, Belinda. Thank you, Ryan. Mariano says, to all of these points you've just described, what's the best reporting strategy you have seen out there? My current favorite is managed self-service reporting. So what does that look like? Luckily, I have a picture. See, this is the great thing about knowing your way around Microsoft documentation. They've just released, actually, this is really cool, and we can maybe finish up on this. They've just released this implementation planning usage scenarios. I'm going to give you a link in a sec as soon as I work out how to. Okay, here it is. The link's going in the chat, and then I'm going to bring it up over here. Oh, I ended up in a weird place. Okay, usage scenarios. So you can read through all the doco and all the rest of it, but what I wanted to show you was can I copy image? Oh, I got to zoom in or make it bigger. Okay. I took one of the customers through this recently. It's kind of cool. This is brand new, right? So in that link that I just put in the chat, they've got all the different usage scenarios, and managed self-service BI is kind of my current favorite strategy usage scenario, I guess. So in this scenario, you've got data set creators and you've got report creators, and they're two kind of different roles, right? Data set creators are more, they might be us, like people who know Power BI really well. The consultants, they could be BI team, they're people inside, they're creating Power BI data sets on top of your source data. So you've got your source data. This doesn't really talk about the Azure data lake and or your whether you're using lake housing or data warehousing or data lake or data bricks or any of that stuff, right? We're abstracting away from that. We're just talking about like how people actually use the service. So you've got a few different roles. Data set creators, they're going to create their business knowledge. They've got good Power BI skills. And then they're creating shared data sets that are being shared off to report creators. And so the report creators, they might extend it again. And they've got this, there's a second version of this, which is called Managed Self-Service BI Customizable or something, where they can customize the data sets themselves. That was kind of like what I did just before with the Simpsons data set, right? You go and get the data, and then you add more data from another data set and you're mashing it all together and doing cool things like that. And I'm super stoked about that, the ability to do that in that thing. I can't believe I didn't notice it before. But so those report creators are going and get that data from the data. So they're interacting with the Power BI service. They don't deal with source data at all. They only deal with Power BI. So you're abstracting all the source stuff and just giving them access to Power BI to create their own content. Your data set creators are the people who are creating all your stuff. And then you've got these shared workspaces and all the rest of it. You might have report creators republishing reports. So more report creators can create stuff on top of that. They might look it into Excel. So I really like this usage scenario for Power BI. I think this is the one that's called managed self-service. So you've got a BI team or a team that manages sort of the data side of things and abstracts that out, and then everybody else is doing self-service BI through the Power BI portal. But there's other usage scenarios in that link. That's not the only one. So they've got a bunch of different usage scenarios, and it's really good. That only came out on the 15th of February, so that's literally 7 days old or something. So really new, which is cool. Shelley says it's the same as OHS culture. Everybody needs to contribute it, but the amount of attention it gets from the top level will influence how much is prioritized by each individual. Absolutely, Shelley. It's this culture stuff. Like this isn't just anything to do with power. You could replace the word Power BI and insert the name of your favorite technology. It's always the same. This is organizational culture at its core. A pain point from Marta, but just before she leaves, thanks Marta. End users still often need traditional reporting like PowerPoints and Word. Our clients using our product can actually access and filter Power BI reports and dashboards directly from PowerPoint and Word. Yeah, so there's that interaction with PowerPoint and Word and being able to to use those traditional tools, but also do the things you want to do with the data, right? And so integrations like that are sometimes important for customers.